before we move on, it's really important to get the following things straight about how to actually structure your classes. Now, here in 13.2, and again, this starts on, or maybe for the first time, this starts on 727. One of the big things to get right is the idea of public versus private. Those are the modifiers, the access modifiers. What is available and what is not available to functions outside of the scope of the classes that you are using. So public and private are the two that we are focusing on here in chapter 13. Really, what I want to draw your attention to is right here, and this happens to be page 728, this is what a class looks like. So first and foremost, we have on our very first line, we've got the definition of our class. In this case, it is rectangle. You will notice we have an opening and a closing brace. The closing brace is followed by a semicolon. This is the same that we saw with the structure. Now, this is where we deviate a little bit from that. Now, at the top of, or inside of the top of your class definition here, we have our access modifiers: private with a colon thereafter, public with a colon thereafter. The members, be they variables or be they functions that are listed after private, are private and will continue to be so until the access modifier that you see, public, is listed there. Now, here in the text, they do give an example of going public or private, public, private again. Don't do that. That's not what the next developer in the chain is going to look for. It is better to take a fraction of a second, not to be a developer jackwagon, and put a new private, be it function or a new private variable, after ones that are already listed as public. So don't do it. You will notice here in this particular example, we have two private variables. In the case here for the rectangle, they are length and width, and we have a total of 5 public functions. Now, the set functions are what are known as modifiers. They are, so there are setters and getters, okay? And these are two big picture items. Setters do exactly what it sounds like. They are able to modify variables. A getter is an accessor. It has access to variables, but it can't do any manipulation with them. It is best to do your code in this frame of mind. There are certain things that change variables. There are other things that report on them, and keep those both separate. In no way, shape, or form do you want to get yourself into the mish of creating a function that can do both, report on and change a variable, because that's going to be difficult to track down when you are trying to track a bug later on. It is best to have mutators, which change things, and accessors, which simply report on them. So that is the declaration for the class. What you'll notice is conspicuously absent here is any and all functions. You know, they're just prototyped here. The actual meat and potatoes of them do not follow here. As you go on through the chapter, it's worth noting that we can represent a class, and we can represent a class's functions in two different ways. Number one, we can represent a class as a .h, a header file, wherein we would contain things like, you see right here on 728, you would see the class name, you would see, we will add a little bit to this here in just a moment, But you will see the class name, you will see the opening and closing braces, followed, of course, by the semicolon, and a list of the variables and the functions therein. We're going to see, or you are going to see, as you go through the first part of the chapter here, you're going to see that all inside of your main.cpp, the same way that we have been doing this the whole while. And these have to be listed before your main function. So what you would see is first the class definition, like you see here on 728, and then you would see the member functions here. This is page 730. You would see these listed after the closing semicolon for the class header. Something here that you need to take notice of that is different than what we have seen previous when we were doing procedural programming is here with our function. I knew I was going to do that. Here with our functions, is just not cooperating with us today. We have the return type first, so void. Then we have rectangle : rectangle : with a capital R is a reference back to the class, and we need those so that we can dereference the individual functions here if and when we are using well, number one, when we are using the function calls, and number two, when we are using a separate header and CPP file. So the way we will reference these here in the chapter is the name of our class, in this case rectangle. Again, remember your capital for a class definition, just like it was a capital for a structure definition, and then the : and then the name of your function and any and all parameters that we would have had in there. So that's the big wrinkle here from 13.2 is the way we structure a class the header for a class definition, and then later on here immediately there under the closing semicolon would be any and all of our member functions.